Today we will talk about how you can create multiple constructors in Java. Uh, uh, Previously we saw how to create a constructor. So constructor is basically a method which is called each time an object of a certain class is created. So whenever we create an object of the student class, like here, uh, this method will be called, which is the constructor method. So let's talk about how we can create multiple constructors. So this is our default constructor, which basically tells us that uh, object is created successfully, and it sets these values to default. And let's create another constructor. So as you know, in Java you can create methods of the same name as long as they have different parameters. So I can create another constructor just like a method. So let's create it. So here I'm creating another constructor similar to how we deal with methods, but this time I'm gonna have a different number of parameters or different parameters. So our previous constructor had no parameters, but now this will have three parameters. So my first parameter will be a name. I'm gonna call it n, and the next one will be the, let's say, registration number, and the last one will be the GPA. So I'm gonna call it G for now. So now we have two constructors, right? So let's in this case, this will take three parameters. So these are three parameters, right? So that's why this is different from this constructor. So uh, let's assign these values to their respective data members. So my n will be assigned to name, and I'm gonna assign my reg to registration number, and I'm gonna assign my G to the GPA. So now in this case I have uh, assigned this as well, and I'm gonna change the print statement so we can know which constructor has been executed. So here, if this default constructor is called, I'm gonna say that object has been created. But if this constructor is used, then I'm gonna say that object with parameters created successfully. So the difference between the two is the first one simply creates the object and assigns default values to the our data members, but this one takes direct parameters, right? This one takes direct parameters, and it assigns these values. So I'm gonna remove this function since these two functions are the same, but the difference between these two is that this is called for each object. So whenever an object is created, this method will be executed if these parameters are passed, right? But this method can be used with any object, but I'm gonna get rid of it. This is basically used to enter data. So the different, remember the difference. This is executed whenever whenever an object is created with these parameters, but this one is executed with the object when an object has been created, and this is called with that object. But let's get rid of it. For now, our focus is on the constructor method, so I'm gonna get rid of it. So now let's uh, let's go to our test class. So let's create an object of the our class, which is the student class. So let's do that. So here I'm calling it s1, and here in the constructor I am passing no parameters. So as you can see, we have no parameters, and let's print the data of our program. First let's run our program so we know which constructor is executed. So it is giving us the message that object created successfully, which means this is the constructor that has been called. And the reason is that since we have passed no parameters to it, and this is the constructor which has no parameters, that's why this one is executed. But what if we pass parameters? But first let's print the data of this. object, and let's run our program now. As you can see, it has the default data from our constructor. And now let's create another object. I'm gonna comment this. So now I'm gonna create another object. I'm gonna call it s2, and here in the constructor call I'm gonna pass three parameters. So first is the name, so I'm gonna pass name like John, and the second one is the registration number, which I'm gonna pass as 2, and the last one is GPA, which I'm gonna pass as 4. So now this is our constructor. So let's run our program. So as you can see, it is now creating this constructor, calling this constructor, which is with parameters. So let's print the data to see that we have correctly assigned the values. So I'm gonna simply say s2.print data. So now as you can see, we got our required data which we inputted in the constructor. So you can also pass variables here, but you can also take user inputs in those variables as well. This is just a simple example. And this is the constructor that was called now, which assigned all these values to the data members which we printed using this method. So you can create more constructors as long as they have different parameters, and remember, the parameters determine which constructor will be called. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching.